Hello Internet, it's been a while, it's been months in fact since my last YouTube video, and today I'm out with a friend who you can see on another BMW R9T in front of me. That one is the racer, not the racer, the sport, beautiful bike. I'm out with a friend and we're riding from Sarrett in Hertfordshire, which is where we are now, up to On Yer Bike in Aylesbury. On Yer Bike is a dealership, I think specialising in Ducati, but with lots of other interesting stuff there as well. I think it's about a 15 mile ride. And when we get there, I will stop recording. So, yeah, so that's what we're doing today. And it seemed like a good opportunity to make a video. And the main reason I've stopped recording is pretty simple, actually. It's been summer and hot. And I've been out on the bike quite a lot, although I'll qualify that in a minute. But I've been out on the bike quite a lot. But I've been wearing I've got a couple of open face helmets that I wear when the weather is nice, and when I'm wearing summer gear anyway. And for the life of me, I can't set up the speakers and microphone in those helmets. One of them is a bit constrained in terms of what's removable. And the other one has pretty much everything removable, but it doesn't have little kind of pockets in the shell for the speakers to sit in, and so they're uncomfortable. So I pretty much reached a position where I'd decided that if I was wearing my open face helmets, I wasn't going to be recording, and it's only now that the autumn is setting in properly, that I'm back to the full face, and I've got my camera attached. So there you go, a long and rambling story. I may well edit all of that out when I come to have a look at this this clip before uploading it. But yeah, so back on the bike, out with a mate, and on the way to On Yer Bike. I think today's route is going to take us through Chesham and Wendover, so both of them quite nice in terms of riding, quite nice areas with a bit of decent road. Hopefully we won't be on too much dual carriageway, because that's kind of boring, although I suppose I can go a bit quicker. Notice Ian is tearing down this little single track road, and I'm more concerned about hitting these lumps of horse shit and coming off the bike, so I'm just being a little bit more careful than he is. I've also can't help noticing that I keep whacking my hand on the bushes trying to miss these stones in the middle, so I don't really want to take a tumble. But I'd better get a move on, otherwise I'm going to lose him. Though he is vaguely conscious of the poop, so that's good. So what's been going on? A couple of things. One of them is that last Sunday was the Distinguished Gentleman's Ride, and I took part in the London edition of that. There were something like 500 or 600 registered riders. I don't know if everyone turned up, it was hard to tell, but it was a pretty awful day. It rained all day, and when we arrived at the starting point in Canary Wharf in Docklands, it was absolutely pissing down. I mean, it was like full-on rain, and there were still people who were in shirt sleeves, let alone tweed, like shirt sleeves or shirt sleeves and a waistcoat, and they were looking they were looking a little bit sorry for themselves. In the end, I didn't go with tweed because I knew what the weather was going to be doing during the day, and I wore a kind of waxed cotton, but a vintage style at least, with a shirt and tie underneath. So not full-on compliance, but we did get an email from the DGR office the day before the ride, when it was evident already that it was going to be a wet day, and they were saying, you know, waxed cotton can be distinguished as well, so if that's what you want to wear, that's absolutely fine. And a lot of people did. So the ride went well. It's the first one I'd been on, and I really enjoyed it. Oh, that's tight for two cars, isn't it? Very tight. Yeah, I definitely enjoyed it. Probably out on the road for an hour and a half, couple of hours, that sort of time. Then we got back to we reassembled at the starting point, which was also the finishing point. Had some burgers, listened to some speeches, there were a couple of awards, and then went off home. It was a good day, and I was there with another guy that I know, another biker, so we kind of stayed together for most of the ride and for the sort of bits and pieces before and afterwards. So that was great, and did quite well with the fundraising as well. I think I ended up, out of 113,000 riders globally, I ended up 80th in terms of fundraising. Might have changed now, a week later, but on the day I was 80th. And I was 9th in the country and 4th on the London ride. So I raised, I think, about £3,000 in the end, so I was pretty pleased with that. How lovely to be out on the bike and to have another R9T in front of me that I can drool over whilst riding, because I have to say I'm just totally in love with this bike. It has so much character to go with the performance. I just don't know how anyone could fail to love them. And the boxer engines, which obviously aren't unique to the R9T, but the boxer engines in general are so torquey and again full of character. That I love the rocking you get when you open the throttle, particularly when you're going slowly, because you can feel it much more then. Lovely route. We did have a choice of going up the A41, effectively going on pretty much all dual carriageway, but this was much nicer idea. And there won't be that many weekends now this year where it's relatively dry and safe to pick up, you know, a little bit of speed when possible. Obviously not in a 30-mile-per-hour zone, God forbid. But you know what I mean. It's soon going to be wetter, colder, icier, and riding will be a little bit more testing in those conditions. Although I rode all the way through last winter, and I didn't mind it at all. I got some fairly decent waterproof gear. In fact, I'm wearing the jacket now. I tend to buy Revit's jackets. I've got 3 of them, maybe 4, can't remember, no, 3. And the one I'm wearing now is fully waterproof, and I do have the trousers to match. It's very warm. So when you've got the jacket and the trousers on, yeah, when you've got the jacket and trousers on, it all gets quite toasty in there. It's lovely. So I shall have to thank Ian later for working out the best way to go to give us some decent roads, although I know he'll be watching the video anyway, so I'll say now, thank you Ian, good work. fact, we're going via Cheshire. I need to bring the bike up to Cheshire in the next 2 or 3 weeks because there's a guy up here or up there that does my ACF 50 treatment, which is an anti-corrosion treatment. I normally get that done a couple of times a year, so, well, I have been getting it done a couple of times a year. So I'm going to give him a ring over the weekend, see when he can fit me in. And the bike is also going back to Lind Motorrad in Welwyn Garden City, which is where I bought it. Going back there in 2 weeks in order that they can fit some heated grips for me, because going into winter, I don't really fancy riding without them. It does get quite painful on the hands. Oh yeah, so that was the other thing I was going to mention. For the last couple of months, and for the next few, possibly many months, I'm working up in Newcastle, which, for those who don't know England well, is the largest city in the northeast of England. It actually dates back to Roman times, or rather the first settlement was in Roman times, and I think I'm right in saying that it got its name Newcastle from the fact that William the Conqueror's son built a new castle on the site of the city as it stands now, and it was named after that fact, after the fact that there was a new castle. Amazing city, actually. The Geordies up there are fantastic people when you can understand them. But it's about 300 miles away. I've taken so I have an apartment up there that I live in during the week, and I have a car up there which I use for getting around. But my bike is still down here because firstly, in the winter, the weather up there is quite harsh, so there'd be very little riding. Secondly, I want it to be available the weekends when I'm not working, rather than weekdays when I am working, and so it needs to be in London. But it does mean that my access to the bike has been quite limited, which is a shame, because every day that I'm not with it, I miss it. There's not much I can do. I mean, I thought about riding it up and riding it down regularly, but to be honest, it's a long way. In the car, it's the best part of 5 hours, so it's not going to be a quick journey. And I don't want to put that much mileage just riding up the motorway and riding down the motorway again. I don't want to put that much mileage on the bike, because they're like working miles rather than fun miles. There's just no point. So if I was going to, I go up and down once a week, and I take the train. If I wasn't going to take the train, I'd use my car. But the only reason I would use my car is if I had stuff that I had to transport. So this is what I mean about the road still being reasonably okay if you want to pick up speed momentarily, because before long they'll be a little bit more treacherous. And even here with this mud on the ground, Ian's being quite brave and I'm following him, but I would normally be just probably a little bit more cautious, because you could easily lose your back wheel. Trouble is, these are country roads effectively, and I know they've got street lighting, but they are country roads, and you get tractors and such like coming down here. And they leave a trail of mud, which when it's wet is quite slippery. I am just following the ride leader, who seems reasonably confident that we're okay. beautiful area. Could certainly happily live round here. These houses will cost, you know, in the millions rather than the hundreds of thousands. Oh, okay, so we've only just hit Wendover. In fact, that sign said Wendover 1 mile. So slightly more distance between leaving Chesham and arriving at Wendover than I had realised. I've also noticed something else, which is this Sena headset is doing something weird in that I can suddenly hear what I'm saying through the speakers, which I couldn't before, and I shouldn't be able to now. Not sure if that presents any difficulties when I get to see the output. I've got no idea if it'll be affected or not, because this has never happened before. So it might well be that I'm okay, but it also might well be that I need to cut the footage short earlier than I had intended, and before we get to... Oh, I love that popping of the overrun. Yeah, so, and before we get to On Yer Bike, but you never know, it might be okay. Trouble is, this headset was relatively new prior to using it today, and it's been so long since I've had an opportunity to make a video that what familiarity I had built up with it I've now lost. So I found myself looking at the instructions today to make sure I remembered how everything worked. This is reminiscent of those slow manoeuvres on the Mod 1 bike test here in the UK. When I think it's like the second or third manoeuvre, you have to follow the examiner at walking pace on your bike, and he tells you to park up in another part of the test bed for whatever comes next. But he probably walks you about 50 yards, maybe not quite that far, at walking pace, and you have to show that you're in complete control of the bike, which is, you know, if you're on a bike that you're used to, and if you're an experienced rider, that's probably, you know, a piece of cake. But as someone new to riding, nervous, and on a bike that they're not used to, slightly less comfortable. I will not put my feet down if that chap doesn't, that's for sure. Just asking where he got his boots actually, I quite like the look of those. But I've got 4 pairs of boots at the moment, and I have tried to sell a couple of them without any luck. So might give it another go, or I might just keep the 4. I like them all, and they're all slightly different. he or won't he? I guess he won't. We might. Thing is, you've got to be so careful, because when you're on a bike, particularly a powerful bike like these are, that can pick up speed instantaneously, it's so tempting sometimes to see an opportunity to overtake that you don't need, and represents a degree of risk, even if you think it's a risk that you can mitigate. It's just part of riding, you know. You always have that ability, that capability to go past people, and it's one of the joys of being on a bike. So it's always a bit of a challenge to rein yourself in when you know that you should. Now, I recognise where we are now, and we are not far away. Looking at the skies, apparently it's definitely not going to rain today, but it does look like it wants to, and I think we'll be reasonably lucky if we don't see even a light drizzle. Tomorrow is a non-starter for being out on the bike. It's going to absolutely pour, I think, pretty much all day. So it was today or not at all in terms of having a ride this weekend. And given that I've been in Newcastle all week, I was definitely not going to lose the opportunity. So I was quite happy when someone responded positively to my suggestion of a ride out to On Yer Bike. And they sell some nice burgers there, which I will no doubt partake of. In fact, I'm getting quite hungry thinking about it, and it is 1 o'clock.